Griffin, guarded by Duncan Robinson. John, in the old days, he would look to take a player like Robinson into the paint. He's just camped out on that three-point line.
Very pedestrian, doesn't want to be the threat.
14 points per game. He is just 1 of 4 from the field. He hasn't even gotten near a free throw attempt. You know, for his career, he's averaged almost 7 free throw attempts a game. This year, taking just 3 free throws a game. Once an above-the-rim guy, he's just a three-point spot-up shooter now.
He hasn't really, his game hasn't grown as he's gotten older. A lot of the guys who come in the league who are super athletic, they become more skilled.
Blake Griffin's 3rd foul. So Griffin has as many fouls as he has points. Griffin. Incredible how he is struggling.
So a few days ago, since NBA news was a little slow, I made a video that was very near and dear to my heart. And it wasn't the typical type of news video that I would make. Rather, it was more of a observation as to what has been going on in Blake Griffin's career. And honestly, we even called it the tragedy of Blake Griffin's career, which a lot of people thought was a little aggressive. But in my opinion, it is literally a tragedy. Just watching what has become of Blake Griffin, if you're a NBA fan that has been an NBA fan for the past decade, you'd understand why it's so depressing to see what has happened to him. So before I give you this update, just take a moment to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. This is actually our 3rd video in the past 24 hours, and I only upload to this channel when there's relevant NBA news. There's been times where I've only uploaded once in the entire week because there hasn't really been any NBA news. In addition to that, I highly recommend you follow me on Twitter and Instagram because, as you're about to see in the content, I literally only use those social media platforms to get your takes on the matter and feature them in the video, because typically I have way too many comments in the communities tab to feature your comments from there in the videos. Now that we got all that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? For those of you guys that have been monitoring Blake Griffin's career, then you'd understand how it started. And I'll give you a summary because if you really want the more detailed and juicy version of his career, then I'll leave a link in the end screen to my Tragedy of Blake Griffin video so you could go ahead and reference that in the future. But pretty much Blake Griffin was the #1 overall pick in the 2009 NBA draft over the likes of James Harden, Steph Curry, and DeMar DeRozan. And at the time, that was justified because this was prior to the big transition to a three-point based NBA. This was validated even more so the moment Blake Griffin took the court for the Los Angeles Clippers. If you are lucky enough to have been an NBA fan around that time, Blake Griffin made your jaw drop at his captivating dunks and his ability to end up on SportsCenter's top 10 list at any moment. As a matter of fact, I don't think there's ever been a player that was more notorious for his athleticism and his ability to make plays like this more than Blake Griffin. You see, LeBron James obviously was extremely uber athletic and is even more athletic than Blake Griffin, and honestly, he's beaten Father Time as well so far. Hopefully I don't jinx that. But he wasn't necessarily known as a threat to consistently posterize his opponents every time he took the floor. During the beginning of Blake Griffin's career, he was a threat to posterize players every single time he took the floor. But one thing that has been following him for the entirety of his NBA career was the injury bug. And for the most part, Blake Griffin was able to evade the injury bug during the beginning of his career following his knee injury that kept him out for the entirety of his rookie season. But that same injury, his left knee, would be the injury that would hamper him for the entirety of his career. You see, after 5 years, the injury bug would come back and hit him over and over again. as he was a member of the Los Angeles Clippers, and you would slowly see Blake Griffin become sapped of his athleticism, but it wasn't that big of a deal because we figured that's just a natural wear and tear on an NBA body. And at the same time, Blake Griffin was refining other aspects of his game. He was becoming a significantly better shooter, a remarkable ball handler, and was even becoming a better playmaker throughout the duration of his career, averaging 3.2 assists in his second year of his NBA career, and eventually even going all the way to 6.2 assists per game during his inaugural year with the Detroit Pistons. His game was evolving, which is a remarkable sign for a basketball star, but eventually it got the best of him. The Clippers soon identified that Blake Griffin's injury problems were going nowhere and he's going to just continue to regress from there. And despite all this, they decided to sign him to a contract extension before shipping him a mere 6 months later to the Detroit Pistons, a team that he didn't even take a free agency meeting with. But he took it with stride because, of course, Blake Griffin was offered a max contract extension, went to Detroit, and during his first couple of years, he was pretty good in Detroit, even averaging his highest career points per game during the 2018 to 2019 season, which was his final year where he was fully healthy. During the 2019 to 2020 season, he would have to miss games because he was recovering from a left knee surgery. And after playing 18 games with the Pistons, Griffin would have a second surgery on his left knee. This would result in him missing the entirety of the season, and he came back this year. But unfortunately, this year has been the worst year for him thus far. And it essentially got so bad that we just got some breaking news in regards to Blake Griffin. You see, the Detroit Pistons went out and signed Jeremy Grant, which is essentially a player that is what you're hoping every project draft pick eventually becomes when you take a chance on him. Jeremy Grant has been remarkable for the Detroit Pistons this year, averaging 23 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, 3 assists per game off of 44% from the field and 39% from 3 with a player efficiency rating of 18.3. The reason why you may have not noticed it as much is because he's playing on the worst team in the NBA. Meanwhile, the Detroit Pistons are stuck with Blake Griffin, who is averaging 12 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, 4 assists per game, off of 36% shooting and a 10 PER. And bear in mind, this is a guy that's getting paid max money. So at this point, things have gotten so bad for Blake Griffin that, according to Adrian Wojnarowski, him and the Pistons have come to an agreement to sit while the Detroit Pistons try to figure out what to do with him next. Bear in mind, Blake Griffin is 31 years old, and he obviously is hoping to find a role with a contending team. And here's what the Detroit Pistons had to say about Blake Griffin. After an extensive conversation with Blake Griffin's representatives, it has been determined that we will begin working to facilitate a resolution regarding his future with the team that maximizes the interests of both parties. We respect all the effort Blake has put forth in Detroit and his career and will work to achieve a positive outcome for all involved. Blake Griffin responded and told ESPN, "I am grateful to the Pistons for understanding what I want to accomplish in my career and for working together for the best path forward." Now, I always had this little conspiracy about Blake Griffin. Yeah, he has had horrible knee injuries, and yeah, that knee injury could definitely sap this man of his athleticism. But after seeing what James Harden pulled to get to Brooklyn, I can't help but ponder whether or not Blake Griffin is purposely playing terribly so he could get bought out and he could join the team of his choice. Bear in mind that if Blake Griffin gets bought out, depending on how much he does get bought out, he would still be earning a tremendous amount of money and would even be able to go and sign with a contending team for significantly cheaper. And my conspiracy theory is that Blake Griffin has performed so horribly that no contending team or no team would want to trade him. If you're a contending team, you're not going to want to match up the cap space with Blake Griffin's current contract just to take on a player that's averaging 12 points per game off of 36% shooting. If you're a team that's trying to rebuild, chances are you're not going to take on Blake Griffin's contract because the Detroit Pistons aren't going to trade you a first-round pick for taking on Blake Griffin's contract, and the Detroit Pistons shouldn't do such a thing because they're in the midst of a crazy rebuild right now. If anything, they're the ones that want to take on the bloated contracts for draft capital, not give up draft capital to take on a bloated contract. If you ask me, the only result of this situation is that Blake Griffin is going to become bought out by the Detroit Pistons. At that point, he's free to sign with whatever team he wishes. Now, if you ask me, the most likely team that I believe he'll sign with is based upon how much of a pay cut he's willing to take. I believe he will clear waivers because, again, no one wants to take on his current contract. I don't think he'll go back to the Clippers, and I don't think the Clippers necessarily need him because they have Serge Ibaka filling that role, and I feel like he already feels betrayed by the Clippers after the whole Mr. Clipper fiasco. I don't necessarily think he'll go to the Lakers either because the Lakers are already fine at that position with the likes of Anthony Davis and Montrezl Harrell and Kyle Kuzma. I could see him potentially going to the Brooklyn Nets because after the trade that they made for James Harden, the Brooklyn Nets are completely devoid of front court depth besides for DeAndre Jordan. I could also see him going to the Golden State Warriors as well, but I don't necessarily think he's a great fit for that Warriors offense either. The Warriors tend to get behind players that have an ability to shoot the three, and we've seen what has happened with players like Marquise Chris in that offense. They've always just been a very funky fit. And while Blake Griffin could shoot the three, it's not something that you would want to depend upon him doing at a consistent rate. Although he is fairly capable of it because there was a season in Detroit where he was attempting 7 3-pointers a game and he was able to convert on 36% of them, which is okay, but not something you want him to be doing more often than not. So let me know in the comment section down below. What do you think Blake Griffin's future is now that he's officially done in Detroit? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.